It was 4:30 in the morning on a Tuesday in November 1943, inside a freezing boarding house room in Ypsilanti, Michigan, just miles from the Willow Run bomber plant. A woman named Helen stood before a fogged mirror. She was 21 years old. She dressed from the inside out. Stiff cotton underwear replaced silk. Next came a men's shirt, buttoned all the way to the collarbone. Over that went heavy denim coveralls with shoulders that sagged too wide. Her steel toe shoes were 2 sizes too big. She stuffed the toes with crumpled pages of the Detroit Free Press just to keep them from slipping off her feet. The cold, scratched wood floor offered no comfort, and the room smelled of reheated coffee and gas. Her final act was the most deliberate. She carefully rolled her perfect victory rolls, then pinned them completely out of sight beneath a red polka dot bandana tied tight at the nape of her neck. Before she could pick up a rivet gun to save the free world, she had to hide the very thing society told her made her a woman. In the 1940s, a young American woman could walk into a factory and help build the planes that won a world war. Before she touched a tool, she had to navigate a minefield of invisible regulations. This is the countdown of the 12 rules she lived under. Stay with me. Rule number 1 was not about the work. It was the unspoken law that explained every other restriction on this list, and a reality awaiting her the moment the victory siren sounded. Number 12. Hide the hair. This was never a suggestion of fashion. It was a matter of survival. Women walking onto the factory floor knew the stories. A single loose curl caught in a spinning lathe or a fast-moving conveyor belt meant losing a scalp. The red bandana tied around Helen's head was a mandatory shield. At the end of a 10-hour shift, untying that knot brought a deep ache to the back of the neck. Her hair would fall out matted with sweat, heavy with metal dust, and smelling permanently of machine oil. The foreman watched the floor closely. One strand out of place brought a swift reprimand. Number 11. Dress like a man, but remain a lady. The war machine did not design clothes for women. Helen wore a heavy denim suit built for a man 30 pounds heavier. The broad shoulders sagged. She had to roll the sleeves perfectly above the elbow, ensuring no loose fabric could snag on a drill press. Safety glasses dug deep red grooves into the bridge of her nose. Stiff leather gloves, meant for massive hands, caused painful blisters on fingers that were once accustomed to holding delicate sewing needles. She looked swallowed whole by the industrial fabric. Yet society demanded she carry the weight with feminine grace. Number 10. Apply the patriotic paint. A factory girl could spend her morning hauling steel and smelling of burnt metal, but she was required to keep her face spotless. She always kept a tube of Elizabeth Arden Victory Red lipstick in her locker. The government told her that a bright smile and painted lips boosted the morale of the nation. It was her duty to look beautiful for the boys fighting overseas, because nylon was rationed for parachutes. She spent her mornings sitting on the edge of her bed, carefully drawing a straight seam down the back of her bare calf with a cosmetic pencil. She could build a bomber, but she was still expected to look like a lady when the shift ended. The rules were not on paper. The rules did not need to be. Number 9. Accept the slow destruction of the body. The factory floor was a theater of deafening noise. The heavy rivet gun was an instrument of pure violence. Helen and her partner drove hundreds of rivets into aluminum sheets every single hour. The relentless metallic pounding shook her bones. The vibration traveled from her wrists, up her forearms, and settled deep into her shoulders. Her ears rang long after the warning whistle blew. By the time she sat down on the cold concrete steps to open her metal lunch pail, her hands were still violently vibrating. The machine was turned off, but her body had absorbed the shock. Number 8. Become a slave to the clock. The factory time clock showed no mercy. Every morning began in a rigid line, waiting to punch a heavy paper card. The heavy thud of the machine was the heartbeat of her day. Being 3 minutes late meant docked pay or a permanent mark on a supervisor clipboard. The war machine operated on a relentless 24-hour cycle. Helen did not leave the line when her back ached. She did not stop when she was exhausted. Her shift ended only when the factory whistle told her it was over. She was a temporary cog in a massive wheel, entirely owned by the schedule of production. Number 7. Smile through the resentment. Women stepped into spaces built exclusively for men, and the men pushed back. Helen was frequently called a girl by her foreman, even though she was a mother raising children. She faced constant doubt and quiet hostility from the older male workers who remained on the floor. Whispers echoed near the locker rooms that women simply did not belong there. To survive, she had to swallow her pride. She had to work twice as hard as the man standing next to her just to be considered half as competent. She handled heavy steel and constant suspicion, always maintaining a pleasant expression. We are halfway down the list. The rules so far governed her body and her endurance on the factory floor. The rules that follow are different. They are the rules designed to extract every ounce of her life for the war effort and remind her exactly where she stood. Number 6. Keep your mouth shut. The paranoia of espionage hung heavy over every shift. The posters plastered on the brick walls constantly warned that loose lips sink ships. Helen lived under immense nervous tension. She could never speak about the number of propellers they assembled, the delivery schedules, or the type of metal they cut. A casual conversation at the local diner could lead to an immediate dismissal or a federal investigation. Even the letters she wrote to her husband fighting overseas had to remain completely vague. She could tell her mother she was exhausted. She could never tell her what she was building. Number 5. Pay for your own patriotism. The pressure to buy war bonds was absolute. A factory girl made significantly less money than a man. Yet her supervisors heavily pressured her to deduct a portion of her weekly earnings for the government. Posters demanding financial loyalty stared down at her while she ate, even as she sat on the cold concrete steps opening her metal lunch pail, pulling out a sandwich wrapped in wax paper and drinking thin coffee from a thermos. The propaganda surrounded her. Her country demanded her labor, and then demanded a cut of her wages to fund the bomb she was building. Number 4. Follow safety rules, but never slow down the line. The reality of the factory was deeply dangerous. The posters on the brick walls preached caution, but the daily quota demanded absolute speed. Women operating heavy welding equipment faced the blinding blue-white flash of the torch every single shift. They risked a severe condition called arc eye, a deeply painful temporary blindness caused by unprotected exposure to ultraviolet light. Small burns dotted their wrists, quietly hidden beneath heavy denim sleeves. The air always tasted of burning metal and thick smoke. They handled the exact same fire and steel as the men, often with less protective gear. Yet they were expected to never complain. Safety was a luxury the war machine could not afford. Number 3. Do the work of a man, but accept the wages of a woman. The institutionalized discrimination was built directly into her Friday afternoon pay envelope. She could cut thick steel, weld massive ship hulls, and drive rivets with the exact same speed and precision as the older man standing right next to her. Yet her take-home pay was always significantly less. The country desperately needed her hands, but it still deeply doubted her proper place in the world. For women of color, the division was even harsher. They were handed the heaviest, dirtiest jobs while being forced into segregated facilities. They were expected to build the weapons to fight fascism overseas, while quietly navigating the rigid boundaries of racial division back home. Number 2. Prepare for the second shift. The factory whistle at the end of the day did not mean her labor was over. It simply marked the transition from the assembly line back to the kitchen. She walked home on tired feet, picked up her children from crowded war nurseries, and faced the exhausting reality of the home front. Buying basic groceries was a complex mathematical equation dictating survival. She needed exact government stamps from her ration book to buy sugar, butter, coffee, and limited cuts of meat. A simple sticker on her windshield reminded her that gasoline was strictly limited to save rubber tires for military convoys. She cooked dinner using tiny amounts of saved kitchen grease, constantly aware of the items she had to do without. In the evening, the radio in the living room crackled with heavy news from the Pacific Theater. She sat in the dim light, mending clothes and listening for any mention of the battles where her loved ones might be fighting. She could help build a bomber all day and still go home and not have enough ration stamps for a proper dinner. Number 1. Accept your place as a ghost. This was the rule that explained every other restriction on this list. It was the reality waiting for Helen the moment the victory siren sounded. She never actually owned her job. She was simply keeping a stool warm for a man fighting in Europe or the Pacific. The moment the church bells rang out to declare the end of the war, the narrative shifted. The factory whistle blew one final time for the women of the assembly line. The radio announcers happily declared that the boys were coming home. Instantly, the immense pride of building the arsenal of democracy was replaced by a quiet dismissal. The government posters praising her strength were peeled off the brick walls. Foremen walked down the line, handing out termination papers and telling the women to clean out their metal lockers. Society expected them to quietly hand back their heavy tools, return to the kitchen, and pretend the whole thing never happened. They were called absolute heroes when America desperately needed their hands. They were treated as entirely disposable the second America was done with them. The era of massive machines is over, but the noise they made still echoes. If this story brought back a memory for you, perhaps a faded metal lunch pail, a government ration book hidden deep inside a kitchen drawer, or the faint smell of machine oil on a coat belonging to your grandmother, please press the subscribe button. There is so much more real, forgotten history just like this waiting to be told. And the next story is ready whenever you want to hear it.